Thanks, Kitty, and thanks to everyone for making the effort to be here. I'd like to acknowledge the Premier for his speech, also Minister Redman, the member for the Pilbara, Brendan Grills, the Mayor Peter Long, special guests and all those who've attended. Congratulations to the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It takes some guts to do what you've done. It's a big effort to come down here and tell Perth what's going on in the Pilbara. I know it was a touch and go there for a while, and to take the leap of faith and to actually come down here and do it and to pull it off so successfully, a real kudos to the board and to John and his team. I've been asked to set the scene, and both the Premier and Minister Redman, as is their wont to do, have probably stolen a fair bit of my thunder. But what I'm going to talk a little bit about is where we've come from, where we're at today from both a local perspective but also a global perspective, and a bit about where we're heading. So, Karratha, and the city of Karratha. As the video said, we're a fair way away from Perth, but we've got a lot going for ourselves. 15,196 square kilometres. While people talk about us being from the 60s when the iron ore stuff happened, the city of Karratha was actually established 127 years ago as the Shire of Roeburn. Prior to that, there was actually two shires. The Shire of Nickel Bay, or the District of Nickel Bay, and the District of Cossack. So we're not a new place. We've been around for a long, long time. But the change in the last 10 years, last 20 years, last 50 years has been the most significant. We do have 6 towns. We talk about Karratha, but Karratha works because, the city of Karratha works because of the interrelationship and the great relationship we have between our 6 living towns. We're also a port city, and I'm going to talk a lot about this as I go through. We're not a mining town in my view. We're a port city, and there's a very, very big difference between mining towns and port cities, and I'll work through that in a little bit of detail. So a short chronology. 30,000 years ago, people were on the city of Karratha. We've had 30,000 years of history within our Indigenous history. In the 1900s, it was cattle and gold. Lots and lots of cattle country, and we had ports established in the 1900s in the Pilbara. Cossack was a large operating port at the time. The 1950s, asbestos was king. Asbestos was the #1 product coming out of the Pilbara in the 50s. 1960s, a really significant thing happened. Japan opened up international trade for iron ore. They opened up the sea waves. A guy called Lang Hancock came up to the Pilbara and said, I can make something happen here. And we started seeing the growth of the towns in the north. So we had the 60s boom, which was the first major boom in the Pilbara. In the 80s, Woodside came to town. And we started seeing oil and gas move to the district. And then in 2000s, we had China explosion. None of the booms before have been anything like what has happened in the last 10 years. It has been phenomenal, the change. And then we've got what's next. Well, what's next is the Pilbara Cities Pilbara Cities thing. And as Minister Redman indicated, it was only May 2009 that Pilbara Cities was announced. So it's only 5 years ago, 5 and a bit years ago. And I will say that at the time I was CEO of Town of Port Hedland, and I heard this Pilbara Cities thing and I didn't believe it. I said, we've heard it all before, it's not really going to happen. It's a lovely slogan. Then the budget got handed down, and at the time there was $250 million put aside for it, and thought, well, that'll just go into providing normal government services, it won't be anything extra. And then November 29th, 2009, the Premier and the then Minister for Regional Development, Brendan Grills, chartered a plane with 110 people on it and flew to Port Hedland, flew to Karratha, and said, no, we're serious, we're going to do this, we're going to build Pilbara Cities. And in the next budget, the $250 million had become $1 billion. And it was like, wow, this is actually real, something's going to happen here. The Pilbara Cities, well, it's become part of government vernacular, and I think that's fantastic, that now it's not just a slogan, it's not just a regional development word now. Lots of government departments know it, use it, talk about it all the time, so it has been a fantastic thing. But we're not there yet. All of the fantastic stuff you've seen and heard, and all the magnificent changes you've seen, Karratha, the city of Karratha, has got 25,000 people. We don't have 50,000 people or 100,000 people. We're on a journey, but we ain't there yet. So I want to talk a little bit about what a port city means. We've currently got 3 ports, as the video showed. But 100 years ago in the Pilbara, there was towns called Ballaballa, Titchula, Condon. None of those towns exist anymore. 40 years ago in the Pilbara, we had towns called it's called Goldsworthy, Shagap and Whitnerd. None of those towns exist anymore. In 40 years' time from now, some of the towns that are in the Pilbara today won't exist because the resources will have dried up in those particular areas. But as the Premier indicated, there's lots of resources throughout the Pilbara and lots of different locations. The difference between mining towns and port towns is that ports don't move. All the dirt and the oil and the gas comes through the port. So the port cities of Karratha and Port Hedland will always be around. There's a very big difference between a mining town and a port city. And so I think the investment in places like Karratha and Port Hedland makes sense because it's growing regional cities of the north. We talk about the 3 ports. There's actually 3 more ports being planned in the Pilbara. A massive amount of expansion and a massive amount of growth in our very important region. So we're a global player. This is a graph showing the export tonnage from the ports in our district. The data is slightly old, it only goes to 2011, 2012. The blue is the iron ore, the darker blue is the iron ore, and the lighter blue is non-iron ore related non-iron ore. I want to focus on the non-iron ore just for a minute. The non-iron ore exports out of the city of Karratha is 31 million tonnes. The Fremantle Port Authority does 33 million tonnes. So the non-iron ore that we do is as big a volume as the Fremantle ports. The non-iron ore that we do is twice as big as Geraldton's port. If you added together Bunbury, Albany and Esperance Port together, their total tonnage doesn't add up to that little blue bit. So we're sometimes perceived as, it's all iron ore, but it is the other products that we're doing there. It is salt, oil and gas, it's the ammonium nitrate, it's the fuels, it's all of those sort of other products that diversify our economy, that employ people, that are vitally important for growing our region. I don't want to dismiss iron ore. Iron ore has been king and will continue to be very, very important, but it is the small blue bit that is employing people, and it will continue to employ people going forward. So the Premier talked about hundreds of years of iron ore in the Pilbara, but where's the demand coming from? I want to take a little bit of time to explain this graph. This is the amount of steel that people use per head across different countries. If we focus on the 2 middle lines here, that's Australia and the US. And you'll see back in 1994, we were using about 400 kilos of steel per person. And we track pretty much the same as we go along. Australia overtook US for a while when we're doing the big construction, and now we're sitting here at around about 350 tonnes of steel per person. For every man, woman and child in Australia, we use about 350 tonnes. If we look up here, this is Japan. So Japan was industrialising during the early 90s, and Japan got up to nearly 630, 620 kilos of steel per person in Japan. And as you'll see, as Japan industrialised, they're now down about where Australia and US are, about that 350, 400 kilos of steel per person per year. We had a little bit of a blip here with the GFC, where consumption went down and construction slowed down for a bit globally. But the trend, if you go through all developing countries, you'll see that there's a spike. When they build their bridges, they build their houses, the steel use per person goes up, but once they're a developed first world country, it comes down to that sort of 350 to 400 kilos per person. I want to highlight the green line. This is China. You'll see 30 years ago, China was using less than 100 kilos of steel per person. They're now just got to that magical mark. Now, if China does industrialise like most other countries have, they'll jump to 600 kilos of steel per person. And the critical words there are per person. This demand doesn't stop. It keeps going on and on and on. So at the moment, China's got just under 1.4 billion people. Nearly 20% of the world's population lives in China. 350 kilos of steel per person, and we're providing 30% of the steel-making materials for them. creates this huge opportunity for us for a long, long, long time. Demand doesn't stop. The last line I want to point out is India down the bottom here, and it looks relatively flat line there. India is currently using 55 kilos of steel per person. And while that line looks flat, only 10 years ago, India was using 27 kilos of steel per person. So India's steel usage has gone up 100% in 10 years. There are numerous Indias out there that are just coming up and emerging. There are opportunities beyond China for us to export to and for us to become important, like we are to China at the moment. Some stats, how we've grown. Look, I'm not going to go through these numbers, but it's pretty outstanding. I've pulled out our annual report from the Shire of Roebourne from 10 years ago and had a look at where we were at as an organisation. The growth has been phenomenal. We have grown our staff, we've grown our expertise, we've grown our skill sets, we've grown our services, we've grown our asset bases, and it has been a huge, huge exponential growth. I worked for the Shire of Roebourne back in 1993. It was one of my first jobs out of university. And the organisation is a completely different organisation now. We have changed from a country shire to a regional city. We've developed a critical mass, and we've got the ability to do things now that we could never do before. It hasn't all been easy. We've had teething problems, we've had growing pains, and we've made some mistakes along the way. We haven't been perfect. But it's fair to say that we think we've got more things right than wrong, but there's a lot more to do. So how have we done it? I talk about the 4 pillars of growth and the 4 main areas that have been invested in. All of these pillars happen through strong partnerships. The City of Karratha, I think, has been exceptionally good at building partnerships with government, state and federal, exceptionally good at building partnerships with its industry partners, particularly the major resource players, building partnerships with resource sector, with the private sector, and with the community and with businesses. We have a very strong partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, which is achieving a lot at the moment. So the 4 pillars, what do I mean by that? The unsexy stuff is where most of the money's gone. It's been going into building roads, upgrading water, building new wastewater treatment facilities, upgrading power, building new ports, building new airports. When we talk about the $1.7 billion, the sexy projects are the leisurplexes, the schools, the Pelago developments and that sort of stuff. But the vast majority of the $1.7 billion has gone into the unsexy stuff, but it is critical. We didn't have this stuff right. We couldn't get another house built because we didn't have enough water, we didn't have enough power. We're not in that space anymore. We're well planned, we're ready to go, and we know if Anchortel was to come on board and we needed another 1,000 houses in the next 3 years, we've got the water, we've got the power, we've got the land, we've got everything ready to go. We weren't in that space 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars have gone into this space. State money, federal money, private sector money has gone into it, and we're in a much, much better space. Housing and land. Kind of touched on it before, but we weren't ready in this space, and things like what had happened is the resource companies had been going around pegging ground and doing all their feasibility studies and getting all their government approvals in place. And at the 11th hour they said, yeah, by the way, we need 1,000 houses, or if they had been telling us they need those houses, no one had been listening or hadn't believed it. And of course we have the same approval structure. We have to go get native title, have to get environmental approvals, have to go get rezonings and all that sort of stuff, so we were miles behind. It's fair to say everybody was caught with their pants down. Government, local government, no one was ready for what went on. There has been a huge investment in planning, in getting the planning right. Huge investment in engaging with traditional owners to get native title resolved. And so there's wins for all parties. Huge engagement with government departments to make sure we've got the service planning right, we've got the land use planning right, we've got the stormwater planning right. I will make a special mention to Landcorp. Landcorp's cops a lot of criticism for work that they do, but Landcorp has been a fantastic partner with the City of Karratha over the last 5 or 6 years, and a lot of what has been achieved has been because of Landcorp's great work in conjunction with the City of Karratha. They haven't tried to be a monopoly developer, and they've actively tried to get private sector investors in, and it has been a great we've seen great outcomes because of it. When we ask people why they come to the Pilbara, when we ask people why they don't move to the Pilbara, or why they leave the Pilbara, it comes down to 5 things. Cost of living, number 1. Education, number 2. Health, number 3. Community facilities, number 4. And the distant 5th thing is the climate. Okay? We've been actively addressing all of those issues through the investments that we've been putting in collectively. But community projects and community facilities are critical. It is the childcare centre, it is the leisureplex, it is all those facilities that have been built, but it's also the events. We now have a very good events schedule, probably so much so that people complain to me now that they don't get to go out fishing as much as they should, because there's always an event to go to on the weekend. It costs money, it takes time to organise, but it builds a social fabric, it builds ownership and belonging within the towns. Economic diversity. I think in the other pillars we can go tick, tick, tick. I reckon we've done well in the infrastructure space, well in the land space, well in the community space. This one here, there's still more work to be done, and this is the future, as far as I'm concerned, about how we go from where we are today to building, to getting to that next phase of 50,000 people. We're not a one-trick pony, and we need to grow in new and diverse areas. We need to use our natural strengths. We need to, the supply and logistics, the Gatbridge Industrial Estate that is going on now is just a fantastic example of how we're now building a supply and logistics base locally in Karratha rather than being fed out of Fremantle all the time. It is things like tourism and agriculture, small business development, all the things that have been mentioned by Minister Redmond and the Premier. But the positive thing is the barriers to entry are coming down. The reasons to not set up a business and not be involved in Karratha, they're not as strong anymore. Those barriers which were insurmountable are definitely not insurmountable now. So where we're heading, we see ourselves as a significant city of the north. We don't want to forget our roots. We are a port city, and we want to celebrate that we are a port city and build on that strength. Diversified economy, as I've mentioned, is a critical component. But probably most importantly, it's a place where people want to live. It's a place where people want to bring up their families. It's a place where people want to retire. It's a place where people choose to live, not are forced to live. That's where we're heading. So, what is the new Karratha? Well, if you were in Karratha, a lot of people I've spoken to remember the old Karratha, but there is a new Karratha now, from a business perspective. So the new Karratha is increasingly affordable. There is industrial land, there's residential land, and there's commercial land at more reasonable prices. We're not there yet, but we're getting better. We have great quality facilities. I've said good up there, but I think it's great quality facilities. Education, health and community facilities are second to none. The old adage that you can't get people in the Pilbara, it's not the truth anymore. I put jobs in the paper now and I'm regularly getting 30 and 40 applicants for jobs that I used to not get people applying for. The thing, you have to fly in, fly out people to get the work, it may be true, but it's not true for every job anymore. Most jobs now, I believe you can attract people to live in Karratha, where that wasn't the case in the past. The other thing is, we've got some great local businesses who can actually deliver on a global scale. You don't have to source everything from Perth. There's a real opportunity to access services, facilities, goods locally, which wasn't always the case. We have our diversifying economy, we're well planned, our infrastructure is available, and there's a range of business opportunities. It's not just servicing the mining industry. We have business opportunities across the spectrum. It's a really, really exciting time to be in Karratha. So, that's where we've come from, that's where we're at, and that's where we're going. It hasn't been a smooth ride all the way. It's been good fun getting to this point, but we're not there yet. I guess the key message is, it would be easier to say, wow, look at what we've done. Karratha has changed, tick that box, move on. But we have come of age, but there's more work to be done, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you in the room here to continue to grow the city of Karratha. Thanks very much.